What's up, dog, everybody? It's Torrential Downfall, and today we're continuing the mini-series on bringing hidden people and stories to light. Today's episode is on another musician close to my heart. Or is he? Did I ever really know him? I also want to say I felt connected to him, but I don't know if that's true. However, it's in respect to Chester Bennington. He was a man that hanged himself almost 9 years ago. But it was much more than that. Within all the words of all the languages that time in history has given us, none are succinct enough, nor deep enough to explain that to you all. I guess this is instead, what I feel like he left behind. Personally, he was a 41-year-old man leaving a wife and 6 children from 2 different mothers. He was part of a small band that he joined in 1998, though he also performed as lead singer for Grey Days, Dead by Sunrise and Stone Temple Pilots. He most definitely will be remembered the most for his work with Linkin Park. He was a 2-time Grammy winner, and with Linkin Park, was part of a band who were the first rock group to get over 1 billion views on YouTube. With the release of One More Light, they became one of the select few to have 6 albums reach #1 on the US Billboard chart, and they've sold over 100 million records over their time. So hopefully you can appreciate how much of an impact Chester Bennington and Linkin Park have had in the music industry alone. In terms of his personal life, I don't know about the confidentials of, who was hit hardest by his loss, those closest to him and those affected most in their lives. I've no idea to what he loved in life or what he thought most precious, nor do I have a right to such information. I think it's important that things he felt that should have been kept secret in his life should be maintained that way after his death. I think that's fair in terms of respect for his privacy. He committed suicide on the same day as Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday. Chris Cornell was a close friend of Chester's, a fellow musician, being the lead singer of Soundgarden and an Audioslave, who committed suicide 2 months before Chester. Chester had a troubled childhood, riddled with sexual abuse. He later went on to experience drug and alcohol abuse, as well as be heavily affected by his divorce. He was reported to have apparently suffered with depression and anxiety. From here on, I'm not going to give you facts, but more opinions, which you can, feel free to agree or disagree upon. To begin with, Chester and Mike Shinoda wrote songs that can be appreciated until, I believe, the end of time. Chester poured his heart and soul out. This seemed to have resonated with a generation, more so than he could have ever imagined. For Chester, he knew pain, he knew suffering, and he found a way to use words and song to release some of those emotions to the listener. His gift was truly his curse. Studying his earlier songs, you can understand why he felt like he hated life when he was younger. But he didn't let that hate overcome him for so long. For 41 years and 3 months, he not only survived, but he also learned to live. He said that with the help of his 6 children, he learned to enjoy this thing we call life. Through some of his later songs, the pain can still be heard, but there is some joy to it as well. Looking at him, you could say that he had anything you could ever want. Money, fame, family, success, a rarely unparalleled recognition and respect for his work, as well as for the person he chose to identify himself as. But depression, suicidal thoughts, spare nobody. I mean, it's a taboo subject even today. Chester must have been going through so much pain unimaginable hurt and such unbridled loneliness that he felt there was no one else to turn to, no other option but to take his own life, to give up all that he'd worked so hard for. I don't think it should be forgotten. You can't always judge a person for what they have. For at times, it's more important to understand how they feel. They say the higher you go, the lonelier it gets. Chester made his music not to end lives, but to help those who are suffering like the way he suffered. Chester's death really came as a shock. It implied that maybe he didn't speak out as much before he committed suicide. But I think it's important to note, suicide's not your only option. There are plenty of other avenues to help support those who suffer with depression, suicidal thoughts. Institutions such as Mind, as well as the Samaritans, are there to really support in those difficult times, as well as people you personally know, such as your friends and family. The thing about Chester is, he was never really one to give in to the social norms. Even with the music of Linkin Park, though he was criticised for constantly changing style, he made it work, and success continued to follow. Even in death, he seems to have left a message for our generation, I believe. We're currently in a generation where people are taking more and more extreme measures in the search of fame and money. We've become more open with our bodies and seemingly erased the once firm concept of privacy. Yet, I can only assume that Chester felt no amount of money or fame could have stopped him from committing suicide. For, there aren't any dollar bills or flashing lights found buried 6 feet underground. I have no idea what Chester felt his purpose was in this life, but it's apparent that it wasn't to have all the money and all the fame. He kept his private life private, while letting his music do all the talking. I believe he felt it would be hard to understand what he was going through, unless you'd gone through it yourself. But he didn't want others to feel the way he did. So, he used his music as a medium to help what would end up being a generation from nigh on 2 decades of pain. For that, he's not just a hero, he's a legend whose name the sands of time won't be able to erase. Though he was such a great man, he did have his own flaws. One such flaw can be expressed from part of his lyrics from arguably Linkin Park's most famous song, In the End. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. Indeed, Chester tried harder than most. He got further than billions can ever dream of. His fall meant that he lost his life, but in the end, at the end of it all, it mattered. He mattered. Chester mattered and will matter to the lives of so many for so long. So if there's any way that, it can be seen beyond, I hope he does recognise that he was loved, is loved, and his work will continue to stay in people's hearts for many years to come. Thank you to Chester Bennington and to Linkin Park, and hopefully, that sheds a bit of light onto a person who we've been without for a decade. Thanks again for listening, and remember, please do something nice for yourself as long as it hurts no one.